Our adventure today is going to take us up into the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. We will explore the back roads of Loomis, Penryn, Newcastle, and Auburn.
To understand the history of our foothills, we will first need to jump back in time 150 million years. The best person to tell us the story is Sierra College's Professor of Earth Science, Robert Hilton.
Okay, if you go back over 100 million years ago, when dinosaurs were roaming the earth, the area that we're in here in Rocklin, Roseville, there was a huge mountain range here. A mountain range that would resemble the Andes or our Cascade Mountain ranges of the Pacific Northwest. The actual beach would have been probably somewhere in the middle of the valley, and there would have been volcanoes above us. So at that time, the seafloor was diving under North America as North America was coming westward. The mountain range would be above that diving seafloor. And the seafloor brings down with it a lot of muds and sands and water. And what happens is water tends to lower melting temperatures. So once you get it deep enough, we get these large masses of molten magma. And magma is a liquid rock that's underground. So it's a hot, glowing red fluid underground. And we get miles of this stuff, and it migrates up into the core of the mountain range. And it might be 20 miles across this molten magma. And then it takes literally millions of years to slowly cool off. And as it cools off, it grows crystals. And that's what forms our granite. You notice when you see a piece of granite, it's speckled. And it's speckled because you can see the hornblende, and you can see the feldspars, and you can see the quartz. These are all minerals that have grown in the granite when it cooled so slowly. Now above the granite, there would be faults, there would be cracks, and hot fluids from the granite would go into those faults and cracks. On the way up, it might go through what we call a sulfide zone. Some of the rocks that were scraped off the seafloor have metals and sulfur in them. And the quartz, which is going to be within these hot fluids, has about the same melting temperature. And it's going to winnow out minerals, and one of them is gold. Gold and quartz have about the same melting temperature. So this quartz and gold goes up as a fluid into the cracks, and then in the cracks it cools and it crystallizes. The quartz crystallizes out separately from the gold, but they're intermixed in the same unit. So most of our bedrock gold comes from these quartz veins that have come up into older rock. Now locally, we have had some of these granitic, what we call plutons, becoming solid after a very long period of time, and then another pluton melting into it. And that's the case here with the Rocklin pluton. It melted into the Penryn pluton. And sometimes what happens is you get cracks in the older granite, and quartz comes up with gold there. So we actually found quartz veins in granitic intrusions, in granitic plutons, here in the Rocklin, Auburn area.
Over the millennia, the ancient peaks would erode. Plutons of granite once buried thousands of meters under the ancient mountains would now be exposed to the elements. Gold that was once locked in the veins of quartz would be freed. The precious metal would be swept down into the streams and rivers of the American River Basin. Considering the massive plumes of granite, most of the gold, however, would remain locked in veins. Marked in yellow, one can see the wide distribution of gold veins in the Ophir and Penryn districts. Gold held no value to the Nicean, Miwok, or Maidu people. For 5,000 years they built their villages along the streams and rivers of the Sierra Nevada mountains, foothills, and valley floor. Their population numbers can only be estimated. For the whole state of California, anthropologists have estimated numbers from 250,000 to just over 1 million first people. In the Sierra Nevada foothills, even before direct contact with European explorers, settlers, or miners, the Indian population had fallen dramatically due to epidemic diseases. Tribes in other parts of the state who did have contact with Europeans probably spread deadly diseases through trade or even chance contact. By 1849, the native population for all of California may have fallen to as low as 50,000 individuals. Sunday morning, January 23, 1848, John Marshall had been sent by John Sutter up into the Sierra Nevada foothills. His assignment was to establish a sawmill. Inspecting the trail race, clearing out any gravel or debris, he and his employee, James Brown, made a discovery which would change the course of California history. Gold. By wagon train or ship, head for California. The 1849 gold rush had begun. Over a dispute on where the Texas border should be drawn, the United States declared war on Mexico. The war ended in 1848 with Mexico ceding large portions of her western territory to the United States. In 1850, California became the 31st state in the Union, a free state. The 49ers who traversed the Great Plains developed a deep fear and hatred of Native Americans. As the 49ers arrived in the Mother Lode, they found the Maidu, Nicenan, and Miwok people living along the very streams where the miners hoped to find El Dorado. Once reaching the gold fields of California, the fact that the Indians of the Sierra Nevada were peaceful and posed no threat made no difference to the miners. Peter Burnett was California's first governor, elected in 1849. He was characterized as politically aloof. He favored heavy taxation of foreign immigrants, exclusion of blacks from California, and worst of all, turned a blind eye to ethnic cleansing of California's Native Americans.
That a war of extermination will continue to be waged by the two races until the Indian race becomes extinct. While we cannot anticipate the result with but painful regret, the inevitable destiny of the race is beyond the power and wisdom of man to avert.
To learn more about the Maidu people, their culture, and history, a visit to the Maidu Museum and Historical Site is a must. Docent tours are given each Saturday morning. (1851). Setting out from the town of Ophir just 3 years after the discovery of gold, prospectors from the state of Georgia traveled a short 3 miles to the stream beds of Auburn Ravine. Panning, they discovered what they had been searching for: gold. New towns were born: Gold Hill, Virginiatown, and Oro. In 1853, along Dottie's Ravine, the Peter brothers, using a common rocker, recovered over $10,000 in gold. Summer, the dry season. Streams and rivers shrink. Mining so dependent on abundant water flow comes to a halt. Until the fall rains come again, little work can be done. Water companies were quickly formed to divert water to Gold Hill and surrounding towns. In 1853, construction on the McMartin Ditch began. Its purpose was to bring water from Sailor's Ravine to Gold Hill. About the same time, O.K. Lethings constructed a canal taking water from Auburn Ravine, just above McMartin's Ditch. The Auburn and Bear River Water and Mining Company protested, claiming their water rights to the water. California statehood was only 3 years old. The water wars had begun. The water companies, exhausted from endless disputes, eventually settled their differences through mergers. In 1884, South Yuba Company bought out Bear River, and they themselves were bought out by Pacific Gas and Electric. Between 1913 and 1917, PG&E constructed the Weiss Powerhouse on Auburn Ravine. Renovated in 1987, the powerhouse is still in use today. With a guaranteed source of water, mining operations increased. Larger, more efficient equipment came into use. One of the most destructive methods was hydraulic mining. Invented by the ancient Romans, whole mountains could be washed away. Entire watersheds were being destroyed. Above Auburn, in the town of Dutch Flats, the transcontinental rail line almost collapsed. As the river bottoms filled with mining tailings, the floodplain spread out. River channels changed course. Steamboats could no longer navigate the rivers. Sacramento and Marysville experienced massive floods. 1984, United States District Court Judge Lorenzo Sawyer ruled that hydraulic mining was a public and private nuisance. Hydraulic mining was now illegal. Imported water from the Bear River once again ran clean from Auburn to Rocklin. The veins of gold quickly ran out, and just as quickly the towns of Gold Hill and Virginiatown faded. Once there were 444 residents living in Gold Hill, 2 hotels, a school, a Masonic lodge. Today, only the cemetery, a road marker, and the Grange Hall remain. 2 miles north of Gold Hill was Virginiatown. The roadside marker read, Virginiatown, founded in 1851. Over 2,000 miners worked the rich deposits. Captain John Bristow built California's first railroad, 1852, carrying pay dirt to Auburn Ravine, a distance of 1 mile. Virginiatown is the site of Philip Armour's and George Aldrich's butcher shop, said to have led to the founding of famous Chicago Armour Meatpacking Company. Captain Bristow's train was supposed to travel upstream 20 miles, bringing pay dirt down to Virginiatown. His plan evaporated, as did the town. January 8, 1863, groundbreaking for the Central Pacific Railroad, Oakland to Promontory Point, Utah. With major stops in Roseville, Rocklin, Newcastle, Auburn, and Colfax, the Central Pacific Railroad would have a major impact on the Sierra Nevada foothill communities. The railroad brought new environmental pressures on the foothills. The early trains burned wood. Their boilers were filled with water. The rail ties were treated with creosote, and repair shops were lax with waste. As the gold rush faded, granite rock and quartz quarries expanded. California was growing, and the demand for granite building blocks increased. The landscape in the towns of Rocklin, Penryn, and Ophir became dotted with quarries. In the fall of 1864, Mr. Griffith, a native of Wales, established the quarry near the site, which was later to supply high-quality granite, including portions of the California Capitol building. 1861, A. Hathaway opened Rocklin's first quarry. Granite from this site was also used in the construction of California's Capitol building. The Central Pacific Railroad reached Rocklin in April of 1864. The very first freight shipped were 3 carloads of granite from this site. As the internal combustion engine began to replace the horse-driven vehicles, concrete began to replace granite streets and curbs. One by one, the quarries began to close. Big Gun Quarry opened in September 1864. It too supplied granite for the construction of California's state capitol. It ceased operation in 2005. Big Gun was the last of 62 operating Rocklin quarries. Rocklin City Council has approved sale of this site for development. A tale of two pioneer families, the Whitneys and the Nitas. With the purpose of visiting his four older sons, George Whitney, a wealthy Boston businessman, arrived in San Francisco. His sons had found wealth in California, not in panning for gold, but by selling merchandise and mining equipment. George Whitney noticed that the miners were willing to pay dearly for top-quality Australian wool. Why not import Australian sheep into California? The Whitneys purchased 320 acres of land in what is now Rocklin. They named their new ranch Spring Valley. Purchasing more land from the railroad, paying $2 or less per acre, they expanded their land holdings. Buying out other ranchers and using homesteaders as shell buyers, the Whitneys could make additional land purchases. Joel Parker Whitney, the youngest son, took control of the ranch. Spring Valley Ranch would encompass over 20,000 acres. In 1871, orchardists, including J.P. Whitney, began experimenting growing citrus. To minimize frost damage, trees were planted on ridges, taking advantage of rising thermals. In 1888, Whitney developed a plan to encourage English noblemen to immigrate to South Placer. He offered to subdivide 3,025 acres of his land, including Clover Valley, into small citrus orchards. Other landowners were invited to join his venture. To service the groves, water ditches were dug. In 1890, the first 12 English families arrived. To make the English feel at home, a country club was secured and a new Episcopal church built. Problems, however, soon developed. The new canals brought mosquitoes and malaria. The topsoil proved shallow. The crops proved not to be competitive. And in 1893, an economic panic struck the United States. The English began to flee home. At the age of 16, Chiyoichi Nita immigrated from Japan. He secured work as a field hand, saved his money while looking for an opportunity to own land of his own. In 1918, an English family wishing to return to England agreed to sell him their failed farm. But California's Alien Land Law of 1913 forbid people of Japanese ancestry from purchasing property. By using an intermediary, Chiyoichi was able to purchase the ranch. Using oxen, he pulled out the citrus trees, planted peaches, pears, and plums, and began making a home for his family. The Nita family, along with 150,000 other Americans of Japanese ancestry, was relocated to internment camps. When allowed to return home, they found their home still standing, but the orchard was in ruin and most of their farm equipment stolen. It would take 5 years to restore their farm. In 1913, at age 77, Whitney passed away. He had designed a granite pyramid mausoleum to be his resting place. Today the site is next to the 11th green on the Whitney Oaks golf course. In the 1930s, his heirs began selling off parcels of the Spring Valley Ranch. Built for his English bride, their home was bulldozed. The new landowners wanted to avoid paying county taxes. The former Spring Valley Ranch makes up most of the city of Rocklin. The last 800 acres of unimproved land, Clover Valley, has been approved for urban development. We all live upstream. Ranchers, farmers, wineries, rural property owners, urban residents. We all in our own way contribute to the pollution which threatens our watershed. Before 1849, Chinook salmon could follow the many streams and rivers up into the Sierra Nevada foothills, climbing past the present-day city of Auburn. Mining, dams, pollution, and urbanization have both narrowed their range and decimated their numbers. How will we protect our watershed and restore our streams? A few examples. John Williams is a landscape restoration specialist. Both local farmers and homeowners should include in their landscape plans California native plants.
Okay, so what we're looking at is a project funded by the National Resource Conservation Service, and it's a native pollinator hedgerow, and it's good for beneficial insect habitat, birds, butterflies, and native bees and honeybees. So we used about 60 different species, a total of 6,500 plants that are planted on contour and along fence lines like we see here. And right now we're probably at, it's not quite a year yet, we're probably at 10 months old.
Insects play an important role in our ecosystem. In the Sierra foothills, Rich Ferreira's Mandarin Grove illustrates best practices in sustainable farming.
What makes it organic is that we don't use any synthetic pesticides. We don't use any synthetic fertilizers. I use very little fertilizer. I rely on mostly biology in the soil, which I have been working on for a number of years to create the right biology. We're lucky in this area. We don't have a lot of pests like the valley or places with monoculture. Even with 3,000 trees, there's not that big a pool for bugs to get started, and we have pretty cold winters so far anyway. So it kills off a lot of them. And I've planted over the years a lot of hedgerow as a insectary for beneficial insects to basically live in and come out and eat bugs in the orchard.
Preserving our foothills will require sustainable farming practices and intelligent zoning laws. Hunter McGillivray of Domo dal Cielo Winery explains how his winery conserves water and uses creative ways to avoid using poisons.
That we practice out here. We currently have about a 10,000 gallon tank that we reclaim all of our water so that nothing's wasted. And then it's put back through a filtration and water softener, and then produced back out here into the vineyard. We also currently have on site about 7 owl boxes that we have harboring owls here that take care of some of the rodent problem at nighttime.
Philip Madu of Lone Buffalo Vineyard discusses dry farming.
Well, my philosophy on irrigation is the less, the better. And this is specifically true with grapevines. I'm not sure I'd farm other things this way, but they need water, but they don't need a lot once they're established. And if you raise them up properly, you can essentially dry farm, and you will get, I think, better quality fruit and, in the end, better quality wine.
Just off of Gold Hill on Ridge Road is Pescatory Vineyards. David Wagner refrains from disturbing the soil in his vineyard. This practice prevents silt from entering Auburn Ravine and disturbing the salmon habitat.
All right, well, you've asked a question about sustainable farming and the salmon habitat here in the Sierra foothills around Auburn-Lincoln area. And of course the Auburn Ravine is one of the major tributaries that flows down through this area. And our vineyard and winery is located right near the ravine. We're about 200 yards max from the actual ravine. And in our farming practices, we focus on trying to do the sustainable farming techniques, which means you try not to disturb the natural habitat, which means the soil, the grasses, and of course try to not be too involved with pesticides, insecticides, things of that nature.
Donald DuPont's vineyard, Rock Hill, is located just off of Sierra College Road on Del Mar. Don has a special interest in preserving the vineyard's unique history.
It consisted of originally 40 acres in the Loomis Basin area. It's a property that now is split into 10-acre parcels, and the remaining parcel is 14 acres, with 6 acres that went to eminent domain sometime in the late 60s to create Sierra College just to the west of the property. Originally, the row of palm trees that parallels the ranch on Del Mar were actually planted about 1860. This ranch was originally primarily an orchard and a vineyard, and the quality of the grapes are really quite good. Apparently, they tore out the grapes around after the 18th Amendment, which caused prohibition, and never went back to it. And the original area was well known for citrus, actually gold mining before that, as there's apparently a gold mine up on the western slope of the hill above the current winery location. And the oldest house on the property dates back about 125 years, and they built this house from an existing structure and brought in a schoolhouse from Citrus Colony and combined the schoolhouse with the existing structure to produce about a 1,200 or 1,100 foot house on the ranch, and it's been here for about 125 years. There's some magnificent old barns on the property, which we've been careful not to really restore too much because they have pretty good scenic value, and they're amazingly strong. We've got one particular barn that is it's about 130 years old because we've got an oak that grows through one side of it, and that oak tree is at least a 4-foot diameter, and it's probably 80 years old. So there's some pretty neat history here.
Buying produce which has been locally grown using sustainable farming practices is something that we all can do.
We're here in Rocklin at an abandoned stretch of highway. It was built 100 years ago. When it was constructed, it revolutionized transportation in the Sierra Nevada foothills. The highway began in San Francisco and went through Placer County all the way to Atlantic City, New Jersey. The highway was designated US 40.
Just off Highway 40 are two must-see Placer County parks. The first is Trailer Ranch Bird Sanctuary and Nature Preserve. The preserve covers 88 acres with miles of equestrian and walking paths. Directions to Trailer Reserve. Going east on Highway 40, Taylor Road, make a left turn on English Colony Way. For parking, make another left turn on Humphrey Road. Just off Mount Vernon Road is Hidden Falls Regional Park, encompassing 1,200 acres.
The
beautiful way to end the day here in Placer County would be visiting Hidden Falls, Placer County Regional Park. Bring a picnic basket and come up and share the beautiful, wonderful countryside.
So we're from Sacramento, and this is our first time being in this beautiful country. And I mean, this is so phenomenal, and it really should be preserved.
Visit our website, drycreekconservancy.org. More videos on our region can be seen on YouTube/user/MichaelStark1 or user/RosevilleTV.